Good afternoon, Year 4. I'm here in the next chapter that left us on a bit of a cliffhanger yesterday. And the title of this chapter is so alarming that they haven't even included it. Let's see what happens. I've also decided not to repeat the terrible threats that Dr. L and Mrs. Marvey screamed when they realised that Cass was holding a magician's notebook, because it would only give you nightmares. Neither will I describe how that creepy couple searched the neighbourhood for over an hour while Cass and Max Ernest hid terrified in the bushes. Although I will tell you there was an especially scary moment when Dr. L and Miss Marvey were standing only centimetres from Cass and Max Ernest. Sebastian almost gave them away by growling at the magician's cat, who happened to be skulking nearby. But then the cat bolted, which caused Miss Marvey to jump back in fright, which caused Dr. L to laugh at her. His laugh was as strangely accented as his voice, which caused Miss Marvey to call him nasty names, which caused them both to turn away from the bushes. In the end, suffice it to say, our heroes acted very bravely, or at least very patiently, and they outwitted their pursuers. I'm also happy to report that neither Cass nor Max Ernest ever considered giving up the notebook, although neither could have said exactly why if you'd have asked them. When they reached Max Ernest's house, his parents were naturally distressed to see their son's clothes torn and soiled, not to mention the scratches all over his arms and legs. But they were so unused to the situation that they didn't know how to react. "Is this how kids always look after they go out?" asked his mother. "Kids will be kids. Won't they, kids?" asked his father. "Yes, Mum, that's right, Dad," said Max Ernest, making sure to answer each parent separately. Cass left Sebastian with his 2 bowls of water, then followed Max Ernest upstairs. As soon as Max Ernest closed his bedroom door, his room was carefully positioned so that it was divided equally between each parent's half of the house. Cass sat down on the floor and pulled the notebook out of her backpack. "What do you think could be in here that they want so badly?" "Paper. That's what's usually in a notebook," Max Ernest pointed out. Cass rolled her eyes. I think it's probably something the magician wrote. Duh." She opened the notebook on the floor and flipped through the pages so they both could see what was inside. "That's all?" said Max Ernest. Cass shrugged. She had to agree it was a bit of a letdown. All the pages were blank, except for the first. Cass read the lines scrawled across it. "Please be silent and listen. I am the schoolmaster, and you are in the classroom. Just like 11 plus 2 equals 12 plus 1, and even a funeral can be real fun. You will find my dictionary in quite in dictory, and if you want to read my story, just look, then unread." Cass scrunched up her face. "How do you unread a story?" I don't know," Max Ernest admitted. "I guess it means not read, or maybe forget what you've read." "The book is blank. We can't read it anyway." "How do you know? Maybe it's just hidden somewhere, or maybe it's in invisible ink, or maybe the poem is really another secret code, and if we crack it, it will tell us where the story is." Now this is why Max Ernest might think it might have a code, because look how it was written. So some of the words are in capitals. Cass thought about this for a second. I don't think it's a very good poem, if it's even a poem. But maybe you're right about the code part. With all that school stuff and the numbers, do you think maybe we're supposed to do maths? "Too easy," said Max Ernest confidently. "Everyone knows 11 plus 2 equals 12 plus 1. The whole point of a secret code is that it's hard to figure out." "I know what a secret code is. What about the funeral?" Why is he saying a funeral can be fun?" Cass asked, studying the notebook. "That's kind of weird. Or do you think it's 'cause fun rhymes with one?" "That's the only rhyme. There would be more if that was a reason." Cass handed him the notebook, annoyed. "You look at it then. What makes you a secret code expert anyway? How many have you figured out?" "You mean like real secret codes?" Cass nodded. "You mean like besides the one in the Symphony of Smells?" Cass nodded. Well, none," admitted Max Ernest, "but I've read about a lot of them." "So you don't really know anything about secret codes then," declared Cass, who believed you had to experience things to know about them. She looked over at Max Ernest to see if he would contradict her, but he wasn't paying attention to her anymore. He was just staring at the notebook. "It's so obvious," he said. "I can't believe I didn't see it before." "What?" "Look at how all the capitalised letters look the same. Capitalised words look the same. Listen, and silent, schoolmaster, and the classroom, dictionary, and indicatory. Indicatory. Yeah, they're anagrams." "Right," said Cass, nodding. Then she asked, "What's an anagram?" "It's when two words have all the same letters but in a different order. And when one word spells another one backwards, it's kind of a mirror writing, called a palindrome." Cass cut him off before he could start another lecture. "Okay, I get it, they're all anagrams." "Even the numbers," Max Ernest continued. 11 plus 2 is like 12 plus 1. Only two capitalised words don't have an anagram. Then, unread," finished Cass, growing excited. "We have to figure out the anagram for then and unread." Max Ernest found a piece of paper and they started trying different letter combinations. Cass had done this before with her grandfather, when she played Boggle and Scrabble. The D and none, ran the doon, eat rude NNH, red nut hena, tree had none, and so on. Most combinations were total gibberish, and none worked when you tried to put them in the magician's sentence. They thought they might have it with hunt a deer or heat under, but then they realised both combinations were missing an N. All the while Max Ernest kept talking to himself. "Can you keep your mouth closed for even a second?" said Cass. "But I think I've got it," said Max Ernest, trying to talk through his teeth. "What?" "It's underneath," exclaimed Max Ernest, giving up on keeping his mouth closed because he was much too excited. "If you want to read my book, just look underneath." "How about that?" Cass nodded. "Yeah, but that must be it. Like underneath the ground, I guess. Do you think he buried it somewhere?" They didn't have any time to discuss the matter further because Cass's mother had arrived to take Cass and Sebastian home. Despite having to leave Max Ernest just after they decoded the magician's secret message, Cass was very glad to see her mum. And it had been a long and scary day, and a hug had rarely felt so good. But there was sadness in the hug too, more than anything. Cass wanted to tell her mother everything that had happened at the magician's house, but she couldn't. There were two good reasons not to tell. She had lied about her plans for the day, and her mother would be angry and possibly ground her. 2, her mother would worry about her safety and wouldn't let her investigate further, grounded or not. As you might have guessed, Cass's mother wasn't as easy to put off as Max Ernest's parents when it came to the condition of her child's clothing. But Cass told a story about chasing the blind dog through the park that was so long and involved that her mother gave up trying to understand and just said she was glad Cass was okay and the state of her clothing wasn't important. Cass knew her mother well enough to know when something was on her mind. Sure enough, her mother didn't get out of the car when they got home. Instead, she turned and looked at Cass and said she had something to tell her. At first, Cass thought her mother was going to tell her something really terrible, like that she was getting married or dying of some rare fungus. How could she not have seen this coming? She, Cassandra, the one who predicted everything, and her mum had fallen in love, and she hadn't even known. As it turned out, the news wasn't so terrible. Her mother was going away on a business trip to Hawaii. The insurance company she worked for was sending her to a conference on risk assessment, which sounded kind of interesting, in Honolulu, and she was going to stay an extra couple of days so she could spend a little downtime, which sounded boring, on the beach. Grandpa Larry and Grandpa Wayne had agreed to let Cass stay with them while her mother was away. Cass couldn't have been more surprised if her own mother had announced she was flying to the moon. She hardly ever travelled, and she never travelled without Cass. No doubt her mother was interested in travelling. You could even say it was a hobby of sorts. She was famous for her collection of travel guides, and her friends always asked for her help planning their trips. From the best beaches in Costa Rica to the cosiest cabins in Colorado, no matter where you were going, Cass's mother had a book on the subject. She had guides to trekking in Nepal, even though she'd never gone on a single hike in her life, and maps for helicopter skiing in Canada, even though she was afraid of flying and she didn't like the snow. To Cass, nothing was more torturous than hearing about all these fabulous places she would never get to see. To her mother, books were better than travel. Who needs to go somewhere when you can read about it, her mother liked to say. You don't even have to wait in line at the airport. Now finally her mother had decided to take a vacation, or at least to add a vacation onto her work trip, and Cass wasn't invited. I know it doesn't seem fair, her mother said, but it's just not practical. Next time you'll come, I promise. Once she got over the shock, Cass assured her mother that the Hawaiian work plus vacation trip was no problem. I'll be okay, she said. Anyways, I like staying with Grandpa Larry and Grandpa Wayne, because they let me do whatever I want. Just kidding. Thank you for being so mature and understanding, said her mother, hugging Cass for the third time in as many minutes. Her mother might not have been so grateful as she'd known what Cass was thinking while they were hugging. The reason Cass was being so mature and understanding was that she had come to the conclusion that the timing of her mother's trip was perfect. In reality, she hadn't been kidding when she said her grandfathers let her do whatever she wanted. With her mother gone, it would be much easier to go back to the magician's house and start digging, and then to solve the mystery of his death, and then to save the rest of the world from suffering the same fate, and then to have everybody know what a hero she was, and that her predictions were real, and she wasn't just a crying wolf. And that's the end of that chapter. Chapter 9 is called A Tight Leash.